think that I will hear the Honourable Ruth Dyson.
Mr. Chairman, can I first of all congratulate you on the extraordinary talent you display in chairing the committee stages of the House, and in particular, most recently, the calls that you've just made. I'm really pleased to be able to speak in this legislation. It's a piece of legislation that we support. It has made some progress over recent times, but Mr. Chairman, the question that is on the lips of every single member on this side of the House is why did it take so long? What on earth has this government been doing? How do they see their priorities and where is their vision for the country? None of it is evident in either the words they speak, the contributions they make. One of the better ones came from Chris Ockenvold, the Member of Parliament who lives on the West Coast, and I just want to pick up a very good point he made in commending the Littleton Port Company. That port company happens to be in my electorate. It's at the centre of my electorate. It shouldn't come as a surprise to the Honourable Member for Wigram because she's right next door and it gains a lot of the benefits from our port. But I just want to say, Mr. Chairman, that the workforce, the port company, the management and all those who are involved through contracting at the port company have been through a really, really hard 3 years. They've had a hard time in their work environment. The wharves are extraordinarily badly damaged in Littleton. The home of the Littleton Port Company itself has recently been red-stickered, so all the workers had to move out into the city, into temporary accommodation in Woolston, which is another fine suburb right alongside Littleton, but the workforce is now separated. Some of them are on the port, some of them at the city depot in Woolston, and it's pretty hard on them. And of course, in addition to that, many of those people, those who work on the wharf and those in the senior management positions, have had big impacts in their home. They've had their homes damaged or destroyed. Many of them have had children who are attending schools that are now going to be merged or closed. And in the middle of all that, the port company has not only kept operating, but has improved its efficiency and its productivity and actually its profit. So I think that's a real commendation to the workers in there. The Littleton Port is very fortunate in that we haven't had the sort of shipping disaster that landed us up in the difficulty that the government saw after the Rena disaster. We are very fortunate not to have had that incident, the Rena disaster, in our own port in Canterbury. If the government had taken the international conventions that this legislation ratifies, if the government had listened to the words of the previous Labour government when we went out in 2008, had listened to the recommendation of the Transport and Industrial Relations Select Committee from towards the end of 2008, the government would have realised that this bill was urgent and needed passing with some urgency. Instead, I don't know who the minister was, it might have been the Honourable Stephen Joyce, the person who features as the key character in that very, very common hashtag now, Come Home Stephen, the minister who, since he's arrived in San Francisco, hasn't seen one victory for Emirates Team New Zealand. You know, it's an amazing coincidence. So everyone use that hashtag Come Home Stephen. We're all very keen on him getting home. So the Honourable Stephen Joyce was the minister in charge of transport at the time and seemed to think this wasn't a big deal at all. He just put it on the back burner. It was a very critical issue for us to progress. It had been recommended by a select committee, I think unanimously, had been the intention of the government. The Honourable Phil Goff actually had a bill which dealt with this very issue when he was a minister. Had he stayed a minister, it would have been dealt with promptly and rigorously, I know that for sure, but it wasn't. Got put on the back burner, and then we ended up with the Rena disaster. Now, people might be saying, what's the connection between this legislation and the Rena? Well, the connection is that under our previous legislation, there was nobody responsible for paying the bill incurred by the Rena, and it was significant. That was a very, very big bill for a huge amount of damage incurred as a result of that ship crashing and sinking. Mr Chairman, the government went into negotiations with the owners of the arena and have come up with quite a lot of money prized out of them as a result. But hours and hours and hours, Mr Chairman.
The Honourable Ruth Dyson.
Oh, Mr Chairman, may I do as I did with your predecessor in the chair and commend you for the talent you've exhibited in your choice of speaker on this legislation. So the government put in a lot of effort and a lot of energy, which cost us a lot of money because we were paying for very competent negotiators to try and get some money out of the owners of the arena. That's a good thing they did that. But had this legislation been passed, we would not have needed to go through that negotiation process. We would have saved the taxpayer a lot of money because the liability would have been obvious in the law. So instead we end up shortchanged because the negotiations, competent though they were, certainly did not get all the money that should have been paid by the owners of the arena. And secondly, the taxpayer had to fork out a whole lot of money and spend our Parliament's money, if you like, money that we would have preferred to have put into the failing health system or the failing education system. That money was instead spent on negotiators, and it's solely due to the fact that the minister, the Come Home Stephen minister, didn't consider this a priority. Well, I frankly think the minister got it wrong, and unfortunately the taxpayers of New Zealand have paid big time as a result. When the arena first crashed, the liability was only just over $11 million, clearly a drop in the harbour, actually, compared to what the actual liability was. The government managed to get just over $27.5 million out of the owners, but still nowhere near the contribution that should have been made. Mr Chairman, the final point I want to make is that this bill is amending once again the government's very weak EEZ legislation. That legislation was meant to be set up to protect the environment, and as many qualified people both inside and outside the House have said, it does very little to amend that legislation at all. I know the member's keen to take another call in this part, but he should just restrain himself. I know this legislation is very interesting, but he has got plenty of opportunity to take a call. Mr Chairman, as I said at the beginning, Labour supports this legislation. It does make progress, but it's a huge puzzle as to why, despite the recommendation of the Transport and Industrial Relations Select Committee and the then Labour-led government of 2008, to progress this with some urgency, that this matter was put on the back burner, and as a result the taxpayer has to pay. That's the responsibility or irresponsibility of the Minister of Transport. The Minister for the Environment should have had a say as well, and I think it's a shame that we have ended up in this situation as a result.
Very good. Brendan Horan.
Thank you, Mr Chair. I'll just take a very short call.